Welcome, everybody, to the 90s First podcast, where we dive deep into 90s shows, specifically their first episode, to see their impact and their cultural impact towards the stuff that we love. I'm a 90s boy at heart. My name is Mike, and I am joined by my partner in this podcast, Joe Kelly. We call him Jelly. He's up to my top. He's up to my left, and then as well as the left point. All right, he's up here. As well as we're joined by a good friend Isaac, who is just going to be a special guest for this episode. And I want to first and foremost thank you, Isaac, for joining us here today. How you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to be invited on you guys' first episode. I'm super pumped about this podcast. Super pumped to hear what you guys are going to come up with. So yeah, awesome to be here. Excited to dive deep into the 90s.
Yes. So I'm a 90s kid at heart, and I was born in 92. I know a lot about some of the cartoons in there, as well as some of the live TV shows. So that's the premise of this show. Basically, we're going to take individual shows each week and dive deep into their first episode, and get an integral look into that episode, see what things shaped the rest of the series, see things like that. And I'm just super excited for this. But before we get into our topic of the day, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping first and foremost. We are on Patreon, and that is the way that you can monetarily support us and the content that we create. We do have 2 tiers as of right now, and both of them have a little bit of perks. So in our $3 Rugrats tier, we are going to give you access to the audio version of the podcast 2 days early. Now, normally they are going to release every single Saturday morning, just like the old days with the Saturday morning cartoons. But if you do support us at the $3 tier, you'll get access to that 2 days early. And we also have the $6 Friends tier. Our Friends tier does give you a video version of the podcast, as well as an extra blog post by myself about another episode of the same series that we're talking about for the podcast. So we will have the podcast the following week. That blog post will be posted about a different episode, one that either is one of my favorites or one that is regarded as one of the best episodes in the franchise, in the series. And I'll write a blog post talking about reviewing it and cutting it and everything for that. So yeah, that is the $6 tier. Go over to Patreon. We're going to be at patreon.com/the90sfirst. So if you would like to support us through that, go ahead and do so. Thank you so much in advance. We really appreciate it. Also, we are on socials as well. We do have a Twitter account at the 90s First, so please go ahead and follow that, as well as an Instagram. It's going to be at the 90s First _podcast. So please go follow those socials. Would really enjoy to start growing those, and so that we can reach this podcast to as many people as we possibly can. And finally, we will every single week bring you the podcast episode on Saturday mornings on your favorite podcast service. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. And then finally, one more thing. I do want to thank Discord for having an awesome video suite so that we can actually record this here today. So, gentlemen, that's housekeeping. You guys ready to dive into this topic?
Let's do it.
All right.
Absolutely.
So, the first episode of the podcast is going to be is a show that I decided. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. In fact, I believe it's one of the best cartoons of all time. It might even be top 5 for me, and that is the Batman animated series. Guys, isn't this show amazing?
Absolutely. Getting a rewatch
so
on it was fantastic.
Right. Yeah. So I watched that first episode a couple days ago just to kind of refresh my memory. And holy man, I was like, I couldn't stop watching. I was like, this is fantastic. I need to rewatch this whole show again because amazing.
It is so good, guys. It is so good. So just to like a quick recap, just to kind of get us in the mindset of the animated series. Batman animated series was released in 1992, September of 1992. So I know I said I'm a 90s kid, but when this released, I was 9 months old. So, but regardless, this show just had such an impact on cartoons, on me personally. Obviously, we have some of the best voice acting cast of all time. You have Kevin Conroy as Batman. Guys, how good is Kevin Conroy as Batman?
Yo, he killed
Incredible.
He was It was perfect for the spot.
Perfect, right? And we'll talk about in a different section just about Kevin Conroy's impact. But like, when you think of Batman, there's often times that we skip the live action versions, right? And we go straight to Kevin Conroy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people regard him as the best Batman ever if you ask them and don't specify live action or cartoon. A lot of people will say Kevin Conroy for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Totally agree. Jelly, you got anything on Kevin Conroy?
I mean, he's the first one I think of because growing up, when I was watching Batman, it was Batman the animated series. It wasn't the Michael Keaton Batman. It wasn't the ridiculous Batman that came next, which I believe was George Clooney's. Maybe we don't talk about that one.
No, it was Val Kilmer was after.
Oh, it was Val Kilmer. Oh god,
I mean, I know with George Clooney.
And then it was Bat Nipples. And,
Ooh, yeah, that's what we don't talk about.
Yeah, exactly. This is a family-friendly podcast.
The first Batman I'm thinking about when I think about Batman is gonna be the animated series. Then followed by Mr. Freeze, Batman and Robin. Because that was the first impressionable one.
Oh boy!
Oh man! Yep.
I know. But yeah, that original Batman, that cartoon. I mean, watching it as a kid every week, it's fantastic. He's who I thought of first, and then you want to implement him into everything else.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to really quickly just run down some trivia, so that we can discuss a little bit of some of pretty cool nuances into the show. First and foremost, just to kind of like explain the show, the animated series, it really wasn't a serial show in the sense that like each episode connected. Like for example, if you watch the DVD release, the first episode that we're going to be talking about that's on that, called On Leather Wings, the following episode is literally a Christmas episode. So it goes literally from September all the way to December, and it's the first appearance of Joker, at least on the DVD releases. But guys, did you know that Christian Bale was not the first Batman to choose a different voice for Batman and Bruce Wayne? It was Kevin Conroy. He kind of started that tradition, and like, I think it fits it so well here in the animated series, right?
Yeah, it stuck out to me. One of the first things I actually noticed on that episode when he's making the call to the lab.
Yeah.
And he's Batman in the Batcave with Alfred, which is hilarious because Alfred and his identity. But he's still being Batman with the Batman voice, not Bruce Wayne voice.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he picks up that call, oh hey, this is Bruce here. Like,
it's got this cheery tone to it. Oh, hey, it's Bruce, guys.
Right?
Yeah, that stood out. That stood out a lot to me.
Yeah, and just like showing Kevin Conroy's just like talent behind that, right?
Oh yeah.
Did you guys know Tim Curry was initially cast as the voice of the Joker? Tim Curry, Pennywise, Mr. Pennywise, and Mr. Rocky Horror Picture Show himself. The first, he was originally cast as a Joker. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but like, how crazy is it to think that Mark Hamill may have not been the Joker, right?
That is bonkers to think about. And I didn't know that until I was actually looking up some stuff earlier this week in research for the podcast. But man, just imagine if Mark Hamill was not the current voice of the Joker. I mean, like if you're, it's the same as Kevin Conroy with Batman. A lot of people, comic book fans specifically, if they are thinking of the quintessential Joker, a lot of people think Mark Hamill right off the bat. And man, it's just crazy to think that we almost didn't get that. Like, I mean, I'm sure Tim Curry probably would have done a fine job, but just thinking of Mark Hamill not being the Joker is mind blowing.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like thinking of Hugh Jackman not as Wolverine, like a different Wolverine. You know,
That can't happen.
No, won't allow it.
It doesn't make sense.
But it says, yeah, go ahead.
I think that that kind of changed the trajectory, because up until that point, I mean, Mark Hamill was nobody except for Luke Skywalker. And then come this series, I think, at least for a decade, more now, because he's still doing it. I mean, I think that took over and turned him into Mark Hamill was the Joker.
Yeah.
At least, though, I think a decade, because when Heath Ledger stepped in, there might have been a change, but I think that most fans would still have considered Mark Hamill the Joker.
Exactly.
And I think that's huge to take Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think that like it opened up his voice acting career more so too, because like after that, I mean, he's in a ton of media, and comic book media especially. Like he's a lot of voices in other animated shows and stuff like that. But man, now everybody loves Mark Hamill, and part of that is due to his role as a Joker, not as Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
so
exactly. You know, when you think of the Joker right now, you know, up until that point, you thought of Cesar Romero and you thought of Jack Nicholson, whichever one it is. One's a golfer, one's an actor. Anyway,
I'd love to see Joker out on the golf course. Actually, that'd be great.
You think of that, but then like you get the Mark Hamill performance in the animated series, and you just realize that he became the quintessential Joker that every single Joker from here on out would had to live up to, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
So,
and props to the animation department.
Yeah.
Because syncing up with Mark Hamill's voice performance, the performance of the Joker in that series.
Yeah, for real.
They did amazing job.
Yes. But anyway, really quick, guys, after Tim Curry recorded 4 episodes, his take on the role was deemed to be too scary. So the decision was made to recast, and it went to Mark Hamill. Really quickly, two of my favorite episodes in the animated series, and this one might actually be the blog post, is the episode arc. It was a 2-part episode arc of the emergence of Two-Face from Harvey Dent. So here this trivia says, when establishing Two-Face, the writers took the time to first show his alter ego Harvey Dent in several episodes, and we'll get to that here in a little bit, so the audience could get to know him better. That way they were more shocked at his transformation from the upstanding Dent to the monstrous Two-Face. The writers believed this made him into one of the show's best characters, and his origin is considered one of the show's best episodes. I agree. It's actually my favorite 2 episode arcs or 2 episodes of the animated series. I think Two-Face was a fantastic villain, and still is a fantastic villain to write about in the comics and everything. Have you guys seen those 2 episodes together?
I have, but it was too long ago to remember. I'm going to rewatch them.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I've watched the whole series, but it's been a long time since I've seen the whole thing. Yeah. And I was never a huge TV watcher growing up, so I would watch sporadic episodes. And back then we didn't have Netflix, Hulu, all these streaming services. So when you caught an episode, it was a random episode, and you had no idea where that was from. It just. So I've seen, and
that was the beauty. Series, that was the beauty of the show too. Is that
right? Yeah, and you were so captivated because you had no idea when the next one was that you were going to watch. So
exactly,
for sure.
Exactly. Dick Grayson, aka Robin, had to be older because of censorship rules against showing the endangerment of children.
Yep, I saw that. I saw it when we were doing the research, and I was shocked because later they made him younger. But specifically for the series, they had to age him up.
Mm-hmm. And if you notice, he wasn't younger until a different iteration of the animated series. It wasn't this original run. He was always when you get to the Batman and the Robin Adventures, it's actually a different Robin. Dick Grayson is now Nightwing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's pretty interesting to see that once you hit that landmark of it switching to the Adventures of Batman and Robin, you see that the censorship rule kind of went away. So interesting, pretty interesting. But yeah, that's kind of the top 3 trivias that I wanted to chat about here for a brief second. And now we will go down to Nostalgia Lane. I know that we have been hinting a little bit after that or about Nostalgia Lane, but let's go ahead into that segment. Purpose of this section here, really quickly to our listeners, is just to talk about some of our favorite episodes, talk about maybe some of the peripherals that we had around this show. Like, for example, I had a bunch of action figures. I had like all the Batman action figures based on this.
Heck yeah.
Based on this show. So guys, what when you think about the Batman animated series, what really stands out to you? What comes to mind?
Isaac, you want to go first?
Sure. Man, that's so hard because and we'll talk about this later, but it's such a huge influence on just like animation in general. The first thing that comes to my mind are actually my favorite things come out of the show are actually the full-length movies. Batman Mask of the Phantasm and Batman and Mr. Freeze, I think it's called like Sub-Zero or something like that. Those are like, because I didn't watch a ton of TV growing up, those 2 full-length movies were some of my first experiences to Batman the Animated Series, and I still love them. Have them on VHS here in my basement. Still love those. I think I have them on DVD.
What's a VHS?
VHS, right? Those exist anyway.
This is a 90s podcast.
Right, exactly. I'm just going full on 90s now. So, but yeah, those movies are fantastic, still hold up today. Even the animation, like you mentioned earlier, Jelly, the animation in the show is great, especially for an early 90s show, and it really influenced pretty much all of DC's animation moving forward and comic book animation in general. But yeah, those 2 movies were my favorite memories of the Batman animated series, and I believe I had a couple action figures too, for sure. Yeah, those just so many good memories of Batman, and because I didn't read a ton of comics growing up either, that was kind of my introduction to comic book culture in general too. So yeah, definitely a lot of good memories.
Jelly,
don't judge me here.
Sound off, man.
But I have not seen the Batman, the mask of the Phantasm. Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh my! Yeah, you have to watch that. It's
Jelly, just like
I've heard great things.
First of all,
obviously,
Mask of the Phantasm was the first like feature-length animated superhero film to go into theaters. It was one of the first.
Yeah.
Oh, big deal. Oh,
yeah, and funny story about that actually is that they produced it for a direct-to-TV movie. Like they didn't plan on putting it in theaters, but basically they saw it and it was like so good that they were like, we need to put this in theaters. Like this is legit.
This animated film destroys some of the live-action versions of
Seriously.
Batman.
It's
the ones I couldn't even remember.
you said you liked the George Clooney one. Go watch this one, man. It's just gonna blow your mind.
Now, to be fair, I didn't say I liked the George Clooney. I said that's the first one I remember.
I thought you said that was your favorite one.
Definitely didn't happen. I can't fault it for having a lot of people in it though. They did. They did.
I feel
good.
like those the George Clooney and Val Kilmer ones are a lot of people's like guilty pleasure movies. Like they're just fun to watch, even though they're absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly. Bro,
I won't say that I
Batman
did
does
not
not have
dislike-
ice skates in his boots. Like, are you kidding me?
I didn't dislike all the puns coming out of Mr.
True.
Freeze in that one.
Yeah. Yep.
That might have
Mr.
been
Freeze's
amazing.
puns are like the best part of that movie for sure.
Let's see. For me though, let's around this series. Definitely had a bunch of toys. Had the Batmobile. Had several iterations of the Batman. Just action figure toys. And then for me, it was a Saturday morning ritual. It was the cartoons. It was watching it. It was everything about that. And then like that's the only time that I can watch it because we didn't have anything fancy. Sometimes I'd throw in a VHS. I do know what that is. And we had some blank ones and we would record over them to save them and rewatch stuff.
Yes.
So I would
Another
say
lost
somebody-
art of the 90s, recording over videotapes and cassette
original
tapes.
pirating. Yeah, so for me it was that. It was just the absolute I only caught this once a week and that was iffy if I caught it on the weekend. Had the toys, playing with the toys, enjoying that. Favorite characters would probably have been I'm a big Joker fan, obviously. But I'm pretty sure was the Riddler in this one?
Yes.
I think okay, so I remember that. And then the only time I've ever seen him other than that was Jim Carrey's, but the Riddler as a villain was kind of one of those guys who was downright evil and also like something you didn't see because he was willing to attack basically anyone and he was like he thought through everything. That was his thing. He was everything was a game too. And I thought that was
Edward
to bring
Nygma.
that aspect. Yeah, to bring that aspect to a villain. More than just Joker's kind of anarchy, organized anarchy and chaos. I really enjoyed the Riddler's take on it.
Yeah. Riddler has some of my favorite episodes in the whole series. Specifically the one with Batman and Robin, and they're caught in this maze, and they're trying to get out. The Riddler's just throwing stuff left and right at them.
I remember that one.
Yeah, the Riddler is a fantastic villain.
So
I think
good.
that's a good choice. Yeah, just like the show in general has so many good characters. I think kind of going off what Isaac said was Mr. Freeze was one of my favorite villains growing up. Excuse me. Mr. Freeze was one of my favorite villains growing up just because the voice acting was fantastic. And I'm just gonna try to pull up here who Mr. Freeze was.
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I totally agree with that. Like Mr. Freeze was one of my favorite animated series villains because of that movie, because of Sub-Zero, and just a lot of villains early on, they're just kind of like guys that are just doing bad stuff just for the sake of doing bad stuff. Mr. Freeze in Sub-Zero, you really see that humanity side of him, and that really made him more real of a character or a villain to me.
Was that the one where he was trying to cure something wrong with his wife?
Yes, that's Jelly. Oh my goodness, why do I have you on this podcast?
I know, right?
This
is the reason right here.
Literally the only thing Mr. Freeze tries to do.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
His wife has like cancer or some like incurable disease, and he basically freezes her to try to suspend the disease so he can find a cure.
Yes,
pretty much. So.
But Michael Ansara was the voice of Dr. Victor Freeze, and he just like the way I couldn't tell if that was his actual voice sometimes though, in some of the because of the way his tone came out, just like was absolutely chilling. It was chilling. Like the way that he portrayed Mr. Freeze was phenomenal. chilling is the right word. It's the pun, right? But Mr. Freeze, you have Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy had some really good episodes as well.
Yes.
I had a bunch of action figures, guys. I had a Batcave. I had one of the original Batcaves that they made.
Oh, dang.
Literally,
All right.
I had a big, like probably this wide, toy box that was a football. It was a huge football, but it was a toy box
Nice.
that had like a lid on it, and that thing was filled with action figures, right? And majority of them, I would say probably 85% of them were Batman. So I was just a huge fan of this. One of the memories that I do have about this show is the first time my family got cable. We got cable at the house, and this was like legit cable. Like we had Comcast and everything, and we had Boomerang, the retro cartoon channel, basically. And literally, Boomerang almost every single night, almost every single day after school was an hour of Batman. It was 2 episodes of the animated series, and so that's really how I got into it. And now I have 2 of the seasons on DVD and stuff like that. So just this show in general is just one of my staples when I think about my childhood in the 90s. Anything else down nostalgia lane, guys?
Can we talk for a moment about the way they did the animation, which I was looking into?
I want to save that for our next segment, as we deep dive into the first episode, if that's okay.
All right.
Isaac, you had something?
I think mine is related to animation too, so I will I'll save that one for later as well.
Okay, let's save it. Now then gentlemen, let's move on. It is time for All That Chat. This segment here is where we do the deep dive into the first episode of the show. So, little bit of a disclaimer here for the animated series specifically. The episode that we're going to be talking about, On Leather Wings, was the first episode that they produced, but it actually wasn't the first episode that aired. September 5th, The Cat and the Cow released and aired, and that was a first part of another episode that would come later. But On Leather Wings aired the following day on September 6th, and it was the first produced. So that's kind of why we're talking about that one specifically. Because I feel like if we did the other one, we would have to also talk about the second part as well. Plus, I think this episode is way more unique. And also, the reason why they did the Cat and the Cow episode first is because they were riding the coattails of Batman Returns. The Cat and the Cow obviously has Catwoman in it, and so did Batman Returns. And we'll talk about a little bit here as well. I do believe that this animated series had such an influence taken from Batman Returns, from Tim Burton's Batman movies, that let's kind of swerve into On Leather Wings and talk about the animation that you guys wanted to talk about, because I believe that Tim Burton's Batman really heavily influenced their animation. So you guys sound off on that.
Starting out, the research I did into it, they were talking about doing the noir effect, the film noir, just that kind of darker, just darker mood to the show in general. And the way that they got that, which I thought was really amazing, was that they started everything out on black paper first. So the background for everything was gonna keep that sustained dark look, which is especially noticeable in this episode. It's got the continuity throughout the whole episode of this really dark effect, especially for Gotham City and everything. And then they did the layers on top of that, so that everything had that automatic from the start, that film noir effect, that dark, moody, and I think that sets a really good tone for the series as a whole, but also specifically for this episode, because this whole episode, the way I got it is they want you to have that feel through the whole episode. this dark, moody. It's how Gotham is.
Yeah.
Kind of feel, and I thought that was amazing. And the fact that they would do that animation starting with a black background, which was not common,
No.
especially for cartoons, for animation, anything of that sort, to start off with that dark background. I just thought was really amazing. That stood out to me more than.
And I think really quick, Isaac, before you sign out, I think the animation is really a commentary on why Gotham needs Batman, right? It's this dark scene. It's this dark and really mysterious animation that Gotham is portrayed in, and you need that White Knight. Basically, he's the Dark Knight, but you get my point. You need that superhero in the midst of this mysterious dark city. So, Isaac, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you guys hit it on the head, and the darkness of the whole show really, I mean, it set a different tone than a lot of cartoons in the era. Cartoons in the 90s are pretty much known for being bright and loud and crazy, and it was like so different from all the other cartoons that were on at the time that it was, it's one of those things that catches your attention right away. What I think is interesting is when I was doing, just reading up on some of the animation, was that they have this really interesting blend of like modern and Gothic like architecture and stuff like that. And when I was reading about it, was they took a lot of influence from the early like 40s Superman cartoon, which I think is just really cool, because I remember watching those cartoons, as a kid as well. Just like, it's just so cool that they kind of took that influence from another comic book show, even though they tried to put, like, even when you look at the first scene in this episode, they're on a police blimp with a radar. Like, it's just like, you look at it, you're like, this is ridiculous, but it fits it so well that it just, like, you don't even think about it. You're like, oh, okay, they have a police blimp with a radar. It's fine, but it's just, it totally makes sense. But like the whole show, like, it just, the animation and the concepts and everything flows together so well that you don't question it. You're just like in awe of everything that's going on, because it just flows so perfectly.
Yeah, you're totally encapsulated by it.
Yeah, you are. The animation is spot on, and let's be real, the animation starts with that epic opening theme song, guys. How is the theme song in this show?
So good.
It is killer. It is iconic. It's absolutely iconic. In fact, it is you see that theme song in a lot of the movies that would show up afterwards. What do you guys think of that theme song? How is it?
Fantastic. Probably one of the best scores of a TV show, especially a comic book TV show ever. And you could argue, because it took a huge chunk of influence. Danny Elfman, the producer for the score of the Batman movies, basically just kind of tweaked it a little bit for this series, and it's fantastic. Again, it's probably the best score for any animated cartoon comic book show. But you could even argue that it's up there with scores of like legit live action movies nowadays. Even nowadays, absolutely. Like, you could compare it to movies that are coming out nowadays. It's just that good. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. Jelly, go ahead.
I couldn't agree more. It's amazing. It's especially for me. Like, I'm a pretty big music person. So when you hear something and it just sticks with you forever, I still remember it. I didn't need to rewatch to remember what the Batman theme song was.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's been exactly. I'm 30 now, so that was 28 years ago that it came out.
Man, you're old.
And I probably watched it for the first time. So yeah, and I probably watched it for the first time when I was 7, 8ish maybe.
Yeah.
And I remembered it. I remembered it. I remember when I put it on, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like
exactly.
Yeah. So
all right. Well,
it's amazing.
The music is just phenomenal, and throughout throughout the episode as well. When you
Oh yeah.
see Batman just doing his detective work, you have this intricate music, intricate orchestra behind it. It's not always the theme. It's these little plot points here. The music is in and of itself a character in this show, right?
Yeah, I think it's well produced. I think it falls on
exactly.
that, and they did a good job. I think that's for most things, but the music that they use, or sometimes it's actual lyrical music, and other times it's just a score. But the
Yeah.
music they use in an episode makes you feel, or at least it makes me feel the emotion. Like that's where I get most of the emotion from as I'm going through the episode. So it can get you on the edge of your seat, like just what what's going to happen next, and I think they do a lot of that amazingly well, simply through the music, not even what's going on screen, but the music, the way that they hit the little like trills and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, I'm in. What's next? All right.
Exactly.
For me, music does a lot for me
Yeah.
in that aspect.
All right, we do need to push a little bit further, so we have the music down, right? Let's dive into a little bit more of that first episode. Guys, how did you like the story of this episode? How did you like the characters? How did you like the side characters? Tell me about it. What did you think of this first episode?
I think this is a really good first episode, and it's really, and cartoons back then were different. Like there was less of a running storyline throughout each episode. They were kind of just like, hey, let's do this character this episode, this character this next episode. But it's interesting that they produced one with Man-Bat, a lesser known Batman villain. And
yeah, just really quickly before you move on, Man-Bat was only in maybe a couple comic books in the 70s, like just a very lesser known Batman villain. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting that they choose him for even if they put out the Catwoman first. It's interesting that they put this and produce this one first, expecting it to be their first episode, and it doesn't detract from that first episode at all, which just goes to how well that this show is produced. If they can take a lesser known villain like the Man-Bat, who is a legit villain in this series, and then later, like you guys I'm sure have played the Arkham games, like he's terrifying in the Arkham games, like just absolutely terrifying, and it just goes to show how well they did it, that they can take a character like that and make it a compelling and intriguing first episode, that they can capture people and get them to keep watching, the next episode. And like I said, I watched this episode and I was like, I want more. I'm gonna start rewatching this show because this episode was great. So yeah, I just thought that was really interesting that they went with Man-Bat. But again, the animation is fantastic. Man-Bat looks great and terrifying, and it was a good solid first episode to start a series with. Sometimes you get those pilot episodes and you're just like, what am I watching? Is this gonna be the tone of the whole show? And then you keep watching and it gets better. But this is like fantastic. This is a great first episode, I thought.
Same,
Let's since you were talking about Man-Bat, let's dive into the villain a little bit. His alter ego was Kurt Langstrom, and so you see kind of Man-Bat is somewhat similar to Spider-Man's Lizard, right? Where you have this scientist who believes that there is a higher evolutionary tale that a human can either create or personify or live, and in this case he figures out how to become a bat, and I think that's really cool because they choose, like you said, they choose a lesser known villain right off the coattails of Jack Nicklaus's Joker, right? Like Joker was not the first villain, and Penguin wasn't the first villain, for Batman Returns. Man-Bat was, and I think it's because he has such a compelling story, And, there is another Man-Bat episode later on in this series that kind of shows more of this character, Kirk Langstrom's character. But I like Man-Bat as a villain because it presents presents a challenge to not only Batman's physical side, but his detective side as well. Because, when you look at Joker, a lot of times his villainry, Batman kind of outsmarts him, right? He doesn't really use any physical force, but you see in this episode, you see the arc of Batman being the greatest detective ever, as well as being a top-notch fighter and physical force. So I think Man-Bat was a great choice. Jelly, do you got anything on Man-Bat?
I mean, I liked his character. I mean, from the moment he came on screen, he's one of those ones where you're like, okay, like there's something else with him. The way that his scene entered, it stuck out to me because it showed him coming out of that dark doorway, and he was kind of half shadowed and then half in light, and he had that look on his face when he came out. And I think that they wanted us to think that the crotchety old man, the dad or the father-in-law, was the bad guy because of his attitude.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But this guy, when he came on, when Kirk came on, and just his first intro into it was coming out of that doorway, I was like, oh, that's the real bad guy. Like I knew immediately, like, oh, that's him. That's the guy.
And this look.
Yeah, just the classic villainous like kind of feel about him. The intro on screen was that same sort of, and there's the bad guy. And I enjoyed it though. It didn't detract from him at all. Like I enjoyed everything about that. I liked that he was personable, that he got along with Bruce there. And then especially when Bruce comes back, alter ego Batman comes back in and confronts him. I thought that was cool. The transformation was super cool into the Man-Bat, and the fact that he was talking about how the Man-Bat had taken over and had done all this. Like it was a different identity inside of him.
Yeah.
And I know that we get more on that later on his second episode, but that was a really cool intro into Man-Bat as a whole, as a villain, through his alter ego, the transformation, what it looked like, its effect on his relationship with what I'm assuming was his wife, was the other lab tech there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I enjoyed everything about that. Especially, I mean, I'm a sucker for the transformations, so that was cool to watch. Almost the American Werewolf in London sort of transformation into this Man-Bat, this full size monster looking.
And even in that, the animation was spot on. It was perfect.
Oh yeah.
The way he transformed into the Man-Bat, it was an absolutely phenomenal animated experience right there.
Yeah, they carried it through the whole thing, and that was awesome. They did wonderfully.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about some of the side characters. So, probably the most prevalent two that at least I see in here, three are Commissioner Gordon, Bullock, as well as Alfred the Butler. So, first of all, phenomenal performances on their end. Alfred, Bullock, and Alfred was Ephraim Zimbalist, the junior. Commissioner Gordon was Bob Hastings, and Detective Harley Bullock was Robert Costanzo. Guys, what do you think about those characters, Commissioner Gordon and Alfred being the most prevalent throughout the series?
I mean, I'm a sucker for Commissioner Gordon. Always have been. He's kind of like the dad figure almost, but the hard as nails. Like, I'm not going to take nothing from nobody. He is kind of how I envision the law, especially when I was younger. Like, he was the epitome of what a person looked like as law enforcement. It was Commissioner, everything, so he stuck out to me. I love his character. I've loved every iteration of his character. There's never been a moment where I didn't like the Commissioner Gordon character.
Yeah.
Especially in this, though. Like, I distinctly remember him from when I was a kid being exactly the same as I remember when I rewatched, less than a week ago. He was that guy, and he's came right back to me. He was still Commissioner Gordon. He is
Right.
the law, and he's kind of like the law in a questionable sense, but at the same time, he's on the straight and narrow, and he does what's needed to keep his city safe.
I mean, he does have a
Not what's
vigilante in his back pocket, but
Yeah,
helping him out a
maybe
little
not
bit.
what's always right, but he does what's needed.
All right, so Jelly sounded off on Commissioner Gordon. Isaac, what do you think of Bullock? What do you think of Bullock, the detective who is on the prowl for the Batman?
Bullock is an interesting character in this one, man. And right off the bat, and it doesn't get much better throughout the whole series because he kind of is almost the anti-Gordon on the police force. Like he's just doing things just to for his own personal gain, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy that you look at him in other forms of media. Like I don't know if you guys watched the show Gotham. He's almost like he's like a good guy in that one, but he's also a bad guy.
Yeah.
You know, and he kind of is just in this one. He's not really a bad guy. He's just kind of a not good guy, if that makes sense.
He's definitely got that feel still. You're like,
you look at him and nobody really likes him, and but he still is somehow there, and he somehow makes it in a majority of the episodes. And you know, like he's kind of like your heel, if that's what you want to call it, on the police force to Commissioner Gordon. So, and I don't like him, and I think that's what it's meant to be. I think that's what they created that character for, is for somebody to dislike throughout the series.
Yep, I agree.
Definitely.
I agree completely.
So, and then just a quick note on Alfred. I think listeners, as you watch this episode, you'll see Alfred's funny side. He's so funny in these episodes. Just like his little quips, just like kind of sucker punching Batman a little bit. Just kind of showing him like, you know how it is. It's like, yeah, Alfred can go toe to toe with a jokester, you know, that type of thing.
Oh yeah, he definitely ribs Bruce.
I think this is one of my favorite iterations of Alfred, honestly. Like we see a lot of iterations where he's a really cool dude, and he used to be like a secret agent in the British Army or whatever, you know, all that stuff. But in this one, like he's so witty. And he like just takes little jabs at Bruce all the time, and it's hilarious. And just he's always got the same face on, where his eyes are like closed, like he's just like calm, cool, and collected. Like nothing Bruce does phases him. Yeah, and he's ready with a smart comment to whatever he does. So this is one of my favorite iterations of Alfred for sure.
It is.
Yeah, he's
it's
like,
one of the best.
Oh, this again.
Yeah, like, oh, here we go.
All right, so on Leather Wings, you can find it hopefully somewhere for you to catch. Before we move on from the episode, let's just give a quick shout out to Batman's performance, right? So like Kevin Conroy behind Batman. Batman in this episode is you just see them portray him as such a good detective. Such a good hero. I mean, you see him save that that SWAT guy from the explosion and everything, just trying to do his best on the run in a sense as a vigilante, but also as the hero. What do you guys think of Batman in this episode? Is it a good iteration of Batman here?
Unquestionably, yes. It was great. I mean, I can't add more. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times what gets lost in today's media is the detective side of Batman. And this show does keep the detective side of Batman, I guess. Like you actually mentioned, Mike, earlier, that they do a really good job at doing both the detective side and the physical side when he's facing off with Man-Bat in this first episode. And I think that's a really cool balance that they do. But the detective side is, I think, what really makes Batman a great superhero. And that's how he's able to defeat the Joker, you know, time and time again, as he figures out what Joker's going to do, and then eventually stops him. Mm-hmm. But I think that was one thing that they did a great job in this episode and throughout the whole series of.
And I think, as Jelly said earlier, as they design the animation to be more noir-like, throughout this series, you have more of a detective Batman. You really don't have this Batman that's going, he can. You don't have this Batman. You have a Batman that's gonna, punch you up, and he's gonna save the day physically as well. But majority of the time, a lot of the episode is spent on how he is going to solve the mystery, right?
Yeah, it's brain over
Yeah,
brawn. It's the
exactly.
classic,
Yeah.
and I think that's mostly Batman. I mean, Batman is supposed to be
Mhm.
this, philanthropic, entrepreneurial billionaire
Yeah. Mhm.
who is self-made, had wealth from his family, but he has done a lot on his own, and he's supposed
Yeah.
to be a genius.
Yeah, exactly.
Like genius level IQ. He's supposed to be as smart as a whip. The
Exactly.
next, I feel like almost Sherlock Holmes in his attention to detail of the little things when he's noticing. And
Right,
he's got a
yeah.
lot of help from gadgets and from his computer, which we didn't talk about, but his computer is a character, and I think it's hilarious. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
That computer,
but,
they took some inspiration from the Adam West computer there.
Yes. But yeah, I love that they're brainy over brawn in the series, even though
Yeah.
he's big and he's muscular and built and he beats people up and he's usually stronger.
Yeah.
Physically, I love that they emphasized his brain power
Mhm.
over
Right. And
his brawn.
I think that gets lost a little bit, like starting in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, which is a fantastic trilogy, but a lot of times they focus on all the help that he's getting from other people around him and not the resources that he draws from himself, even though he's obviously the main character and he's the one doing all the work and stuff like that. But they definitely give him a lot more help than he probably needs as Bruce Wayne Batman.
At least
in
he
that
should
series.
have.
Right. And they do a really good job in this series showing that all of the resources are from him.
Yeah.
Or they don't really show, like maybe he had other people help him, but that's just not the focus.
Yeah, exactly. Man, great first episode, guys. Let's rate it. Let's rate it out of 5 bats. What do you give it?
Bats or batarangs? Yeah, I'm gonna give it.
Bats.
I'm gonna give it a 5 batarangs.
5 batarangs. What do you?
I'll give it a 5 utility belts.
Ooh.
5 utility belts out of 5.
I'll give it 5. That Cyclops gadget glasses that they had out of 5.
Yes.
His infrared scanning tool from Star Trek.
Yeah, right. Just looked like Cyclops from X-Men. Anyway, let's move on to a segment that we like to call Industry Impact. Welcome back. We're going to be talking about just really briefly because we're running. I do want to try to keep this podcast around an hour 15. But really quickly, this show has an impact on the industry, and each and every week, the show that we talk about, we want to talk about its industry impact, not only in TV, not only in movies, but in video games, in comic books, or in any other medium that we think necessary to speak about. So, first, I think first and foremost, we need to talk about the impact of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill specifically. Isaac and Jelly, these guys are always pegged as the person behind the characters in every single medium from here on out when it comes to Batman and Joker. So we have the Arkham games, right? The Arkham games aren't as successful, in my opinion, if you don't have Kevin Conroy and you don't have Mark Hamill behind the Joker. What do you think about that, Isaac?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those games are fantastic, but if you have flat voice acting in any games, it just doesn't come off like there's not as much emotion in the game itself. And just to speak to that, I love Spider-Man. He's my favorite superhero. The Spider-Man PS4 game is fantastic, and I think one of the only things that makes that game is the amazing voice acting. And I'm trying to remember his name now. Yuri
Yeah,
Yuri somebody or other is the voice of Spider-Man in that, and like that's one of the only games that's ever made me like cry, like tear up, because the end of that game is just very emotional.
Don't spoil it. I haven't finished it yet.
No, I'm not saying anything about it, but it's fantastic. It's very, very good. Very emotional, and if you have bad voice acting, things don't get emotional. And Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill have such good rapport and banter in the Arkham games that they make the game complete. And they're great graphically. They're great. You know, they have all the bells and whistles of modern video games that still even hold up, you know, now. Like I could go back and play Arkham City like right now. It's fantastic.
One of my top 5 favorite games of all time.
Yeah. So yeah, if you don't have those good voice actors, you could still make a good game for sure, but I think that they just up the level of quality that your game or production has if you have those guys included for sure.
You know, in more so in Mark Hamill's case with the Joker, every time Mark Hamill is not portraying the Joker, everybody else is trying to portray Mark Hamill, right? Like everybody is more not really taking their own spin on it. When it comes to animation, obviously you have Heath Ledger, Jared Leto. I mean, we don't have to talk about that.
Let's forget about him.
But you have Heath Ledger's, you know, just completely different. But every time it seems you have an animated Joker, if it's not Mark Hamill, it's always somebody like trying to impersonate him. And I just think that's such an impactful way of looking at the industry as to how he has affected the Joker character in and of himself. Really quickly, guys, this show started Harley Quinn. If you guys didn't know that, I know you guys did, but listeners, if you didn't know that, Harley Quinn first started in Batman animated series. What do we miss if we don't have Harley Quinn?
Well, we miss more Joker for sure, because she is such a good complement to him, and there are so many good forms of Harley Quinn that have come out in the past 2 decades since she was conceived as a character, and she again makes the Joker a better character in a lot of ways. So yeah, definitely. And then Margot Robbie has done a fantastic job of playing her live action in the past, you know. Yes. What, has it been a decade since Suicide Squad came out? Gosh, that's crazy. Not quite a decade. but yeah, just like if you don't have Harley Quinn, we maybe get less Joker, and maybe Joker has slightly less of an impact. I mean, Mark Hamill would still be fantastic either way, but she's just such a good compliment to him, and a good character in her own right too. That's not to say that, you know, she's only good as Joker's compliment or sidekick or whatever, but yeah, I just think that's interesting that it might be slightly less of an impact if we don't have her in there at all.
I don't think we would get less Joker, because I think you know, this is another conversation, but I think Joker is the best comic book villain of all time, just because of how he was written. But I think you're right. I think you get this understanding that there are fantastic episodes of this series as well as future episodes of other series that you kind of see this grounding of the Joker to, you know, he falls to the earth when you have this Harley Quinn, and you just kind of see this other side of him as a villain trying to juggle his side piece, you know, Harley Quinn, versus, you know, really his end goal, which is to defeat Batman, you know, that type of thing. Harley Quinn is such a fantastic character, as you said, Isaac, in and of herself as well. Jelly, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that her character, especially in this series, because this is where she was made, I think that her character in the series drives the Joker's character to places that it probably would have never gone had she not been involved, because she is a bit of an interest for him, as well as being absolutely insane. They have to juggle that, and I think them juggling that relationship of crime versus love versus whatever that other thing is, insanity, whatever. I think that drives their characters both up into places that I don't think they would have gone or gotten to
Yeah.
without her being here. I think that especially in the later iteration where she's more of an involvement with him, because I don't remember her being so much an involvement with him in this one.
Yeah.
But I think that her character drives his uh, again to places where I don't think it would have gone had she
Yeah.
not been involved, had she
Mhm.
not been added to. And then yeah, in her own right, she's crazy, she's absolutely insane, she's funny, and yeah, she's so entertaining in her own right as a villain.
Yeah.
That I've loved her. Her and her big hammer.
Well, guys, that's kind of all for today. Thank you guys so much, Jelly, Isaac, for joining me. Really quick, I do want to do this segment probably at the start of the episodes coming up, but this quick segment here is just what have you guys been up to? What have you been doing? Video game wise, reading wise, movie, TV show wise. What have you guys been up to? Why don't you go ahead and start, Isaac?
So I mean, I put basically most of my time into video games when I'm at home, when I'm not with my family and kids and stuff like that. So mostly I've been getting into Warzone quite a bit. Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone, just been a blast. Like me and Infinity Bros, a group that I'm a part of, we game almost on a daily basis, weekly for sure. And we kind of did jump on the battle royale bandwagon back when Fortnite was popular a couple of years ago, and we really haven't gotten off. Like every version that comes out, we're on playing it, and Warzone has been great. Like we've been really enjoying Warzone. But I recently, like a couple months ago, picked up Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 for my Switch finally, and I've really been finally getting into that, and that's an awesome game.
Yeah, we need to play some together.
Yeah, totally. That would be a blast. It's a throwback because Ultimate Alliance 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. Civil War is one of my favorite comic book runs of all time, and that game is a fantastic version of that run. And it's a really great throwback. Like the graphics are great, the characters are great, and it's like the exact same gameplay as the previous Ultimate Alliance game. So really getting into that. Other than that, I'm a nurse, so I've been at work just plowing away, doing what I normally do. Nothing really has changed for me as life goes. My wife is a dance instructor, so she's at home now. So been spending a lot more family time together, which is nice.
Good. Really good.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, but just gaming pretty much. That's pretty much what I do. So
okay, good. Jelly, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I'm a family guy, so I got 2 kids. I'm very busy all the time, hanging out with them. There's always something to do, to be done. So that comes first. After that, I'm big into gaming. Love video games. Love Apex right now. Apex is far and away my favorite.
It's a great game.
Great game. Catch me on there if you got an Xbox. Apart from that, I'm still working, but I'm custodian in high school, so I'm essential but not essential, so I'm working on rotation. Work once every 8 days right now. That will probably change soon, but as for now, I'm getting a lot of time with the family. It's been great.
Good.
It's been fun.
Good.
And yeah, video games, podcasts, TV I don't watch too much of, but when I do, it's usually nerdy shows. I like Chuck. It's on Amazon Prime.
Nice.
So for me, I've just been really focused on getting this podcast started. So designing a logo and everything. So, but other than that, I do stream. I under the handle Stay at Home Gamer. So I've been streaming a lot of Apex recently, and then Apex Legends is probably my favorite game right now. But other than that, I've been playing. Seems like I'm in the middle of so many games, right? Ori and the Blind Forest. I'm trying to finish up Spider-Man. TV shows. I've been watching a lot of Big Brother with my wife. We CBS did a free month to their CBS All Access, so we signed up for that.
Ooh.
And we're just
I'm gonna have to catch Picard.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you a Star Trek fan?
I am. I just haven't had time.
Mhm.
But been wanting to. But been catching up on some of the old seasons of Big Brother. It's just a reality TV show that we watch every single year. And then this year I got pretty heavily into The Voice, so I've been watching The Voice.
Nice.
I'm right there with you.
I'm a singer. I'm a singer as well at heart, so just watching The Voice is pretty fun. Other than that, yeah. Isaac, plug something. Where can the listeners catch you specifically? Jelly, I know where they could catch you in this in this podcast. But
Yeah,
Isaac is
right
our
here.
special guest today. He is part of the Infinity Bros. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for having me on. First of all, pleasure and an honor to be on the first episode. You can find me. Again, like I said, I am part of a group called the Infinity Bros. We are a group of 6 dudes, and we have a podcast, the Infinity Bros podcast. We just talk about pop culture, anything from TV, movies, video games, comic books, stuff that we nerd out about, basically. So you can catch us at theinfinitybros.com. You can find all our links there. Me specifically, you can find me mostly on Twitter at Isaacolistic, which is kind of a mouthful, but ISAKOLISTIC. Don't ask me where it came from. It's not a good story. So yeah, I'd love to interact with you guys. And again, thank you guys so much for being on. This has been a blast. I love talking nerdy stuff. Batman the Animated Series is fantastic.
Good.
Yeah.
Super glad to have you
All
on this
right.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
I knew that Isaac, he's part of my Discord for my Twitch channel, and I knew that he has podcasting experience, and I knew he had this time frame set apart that we could potentially get him on here for the first episode. So thank you so much once again for joining, buddy. Jelly, where can we find you?
Yeah, right here. Find me right here. The 90s first. I'm gonna be handling socials. So again, the Twitter is gonna be at 90s first, and then the Instagram is gonna be at 90s first _ podcast.
Yeah.
Find me there. Get a hold of me. I'll chat with you. I'll hang out with you virtually.
Yeah, besides some of the media stuff like the videos and some of the graphic design, Jelly's going to be mostly behind our socials. So just go chat with him there and chat with me there. I'm going to be checking it as well. But yeah, thanks for plugging that again.
Yeah,
Anything else?
You'll find us both there.
Yeah.
And what was my gamer tag? Jelly210, J3LLY210 on
That's
Xbox.
his Xbox gamer tag if you want to hit some Apex.
Come play games with me.
But yeah, anyway, my name's Mike. You can find me more of a personal in my gaming account at Stay at Home Gamer on Instagram, as well as Stay at Home Gamer on Twitter without the E in gamer, so GAMR on the Twitter. And you can just find me posting clips and stuff. But other than that, this has been the inaugural episode of the 90s First. Thank you, Jelly. Thank you, Isaac. We'll see you guys later. Have a good day.
Peace.